This is Pastor Scott Conway at QX Church. Find us online at qxchurch.org, and today we're talking about goals and opportunities. Jumping right into Romans 8:28, the insight here is things can work together for good. Now, admittedly, they don't always work together for good, but they can. This is what Romans 8:28 reminds us. All things work together for good. Now, if you stop right there, you go, well, what do you mean things can work together for good? It says right there, all things work together for good. There's a caveat here. For those who love God and are called according to his will. So there's some conditions. One of the conditions is loving God. That all things work together for good if you love God. All things work together for good if you are called. All things work together good if you are walking in God's will. And all three of these apparently are a part of the deal. So all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his will. Now I will add though, this is also a general principle. So whether you are in love with God or not, whether you are called or not, whether you are walking according to his will or not, it is my observation and my personal experience that most things can work together for good. Some of the same principles apply in a slightly different way. So if you love God, that means that you are pursuing the ultimate. You are pursuing the highest and the best. You are pursuing the creator of the universe who designed and engineered this magnificent cause and effect universe. It means that you are walking out your faith, that you are walking it out, and the fruit of the Spirit should be evident in your life with love, joy, and peace. And that if you have that much of the love of God, you're doing pretty well. And if you are called, being called by God has multiple levels. One level of a call that we usually think of as God has given you a mission. God has placed upon your heart a desire to do a thing. Back in 1989, I believe I received a call to do martial arts. And in 1990, I founded a system. And now here I am, some 30 years later, still doing what I was called to do. In 2003, I believe I was called to be a pastor. In January of 2005, I started pastoring. In the 15 years since, I've continued to walk out that call. However, several years ago, I felt a release from the call. The release from the call was you're no longer called to do it. It's no longer a mission. It's no longer an assignment. Now it's your choice. Do you stay with it or do you not stay with it? And there was a definitive sense of a release. And yet I continue to walk it out. And walking according to his will. And part of the will of God is leaning upon Christ's salvation, walking in love, walking in joy, walking in peace, manifesting the fruit of the Spirit. A lot of times when we think about walking according to his will, we think about, well, you have to follow all the rules and not do any wrong things and live this very rigid life. And if you learn God's will from more fundamentalists, it's all these things you don't do kind of thinking, you might think that walking according to his will is all about following the rules and not as much what Jesus himself said is the number one law of God is to love God. And the second is like the first, love your neighbor as yourself. But the fundamental law of God is love, the rest is commentary. Now, here's part of an interesting observation that's not mine, but it's about 100 years old. Less than 100 years ago, it was the advice of the most read success author of all time. He says, every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. Now, compare that to all things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his will. And consider what that means when something goes really, really bad. Says, well, in some way, shape, or form, this can work together for good. If you love God, you lean on God. If you are called and you're walking out his will. The 20th century version is every adversity, every failure, every heartache carries with it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. That's Napoleon Hill out of Think and Grow Rich. Typically thought of as a money book, and it certainly is that. But when you look at what Napoleon Hill's list of the riches of men are, money is one out of 12 things on the list. Beginning with mental attitude, harmonious relationships with your fellow human beings. And it begins to sound a lot like positive mental attitude, joy, peace, harmonious relationships, love. It sounds a lot like the fruit of the Spirit. He also made this observation. Most great people have attained their greatest success just one step beyond their greatest failure. Also Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. And when you look at these things, you go, King David had one of his greatest successes, defeated Goliath, got elevated, and got to be known as the general who was responsible for the defeat of tens of thousands compared to the king of his thousands. And then he's an outcast. The king's hunting him down and trying to kill him. That doesn't look like success on the path to becoming king. And yet, that was part of his path to becoming king. When you look at Peter, the Apostle Peter, and he goes, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but God who is in heaven." The next thing recorded that Jesus said to him is, "Get thee behind me, Satan." Now imagine being Peter, but what happened to blessed are you? I like blessed are you. Blessed are you is much nicer than get thee behind me, Satan. How did I go from blessed to Satan? And Peter going from like, well, I will never deny you. I will never betray you. And that very night saying, I don't even know the man. Until the cock crows and he goes like, oh my gosh, I did it. But then he gives the first post-Pentecost sermon, and 3,000 people come to faith. So the path to the greatest success is often on the other side of our greatest failure. Now here's another part of this observation before I continue on with this. For some people, it seems like you have to go through the hard stuff to get the good lesson. But here is a key thing to remember. The hard stuff is not the treasure. The lesson is the treasure. If we talk to decamillionaires, it seems the average number of bankruptcies of the average decamillionaire, the people who built up their own fortunes to over $10 million, is that they have about 3.5 bankruptcies. That means that right at that middle line, that 50% line of the bell curve, you've got 3 or 4 bankruptcies typical. Well, here's part of how that works. They start business, they're moving forward, they're doing some things, they're taking some risks, and it all falls apart. And they have to file bankruptcy. But they want to succeed, so they pick themselves up, they dust themselves off, and they get going again. Very Christian, by the way, because that is how we deal with sin. That Jesus Christ is worthy and true to forgive us our sins if we will confess our sins. But there's a repentance element involved with that, where it says, I'm not doing this anymore. But the way you deal with bankruptcy in business is not that, well, I'm not doing business anymore. It's, I won't make the exact same mistake again. Well, very typically, they get up, they get going, and they go bankrupt again. But here's the trick. If the second time you go bankrupt, you went bankrupt for exactly the same reason you went bankrupt with last time, that's a problem. But if you pass the test that you failed at that first bankruptcy, you made it further down the path. Something else had to get you this time. You're learning. And then you decide, I'm not making that mistake again. And they get it, they dust themselves off, and they try again. Then they pass the first test and the second test. And then the third or the fourth gate they get through, either they fail for a different reason or they make it. And very often, once they've made it, people are like, oh, look, I knew they could do it. They had to walk through failure and failure and failure and failure to get there. But they learned. Now, the bankruptcy is not the treasure. The lessons they learned in the bankruptcy was the treasure. What if you could learn the lessons without going through the bankruptcy? Now, in business, we call that getting a business coach. In business, we call it getting a qualified consultant. In business, we call that getting a mentor. That you find someone who can help you through. In matters of faith, we call that mentorship, discipleship. You find a more seasoned Christian that can help you walk out your faith so that you don't go faith bankrupt. So that when you encounter a crisis of faith, the risk of faith bankruptcy, that you can walk it through and get to the other side. That when you're dealing with marriage, that's marriage counseling, marriage coaching, marriage training. Now, ideally in these things, if most people go to marriage counseling when their marriage is in trouble, when it's do or die, that if they can't fix this thing, they're ready to get divorced. That's normal. But that's a lot like a business saying, I'm about to go bankrupt, now I need to hire a coach. Well, chances are you don't have the money to afford a coach that's going to be good enough to get you through the bankruptcy. That the time to do it is before you're in that level of trouble. And better is to just go learn ahead of time. When you're doing well, get someone to help you do better so you don't wait for the crisis. And my individual case when it comes to relationship stuff, there's a whole set of YORI programs, stands for you, others, relationship, intimacy. And if you go learn those things and put them into practice, you never have to hit the crisis. If you know you've got junk inside of you and you need to let it go, go 5-step forgiveness instead of waiting until it creates a crisis. That if you're dealing with this flow of stuff, go learn, embrace, elevate, expand instead of waiting until there's a crisis. Because here's part of what happens. At the moment of crisis, you're highly motivated, but the least capable. Because you're in intense emotion. You have the most intense fear. You have the most intense overwhelm. You have the most intense anger. You have the most intense feeling of hopelessness. You have the most intense pain, and now you're trying to build, and you'll be highly motivated to move forward, but it's also when you're the least capable of the clearest thought. It's when you're the least capable of clean planning. And so you use the crisis as the reminder, or the pending crisis as the reminder, now would be a good time to do things when you're not in crisis. So when it comes to goals, even God has goals. And God has goals and plans for you. Philippians 1:6, the second half, says, he who began a good work in you will perfect it until the day of Christ Jesus. God has a goal. He's working the goal. He began a good work, and he's going to keep on doing it. He's going to keep running his plan. He's going to run his side of his plan perfectly until you're no longer here. And then he gets the rest of the fulfillment of his plan. Now, here's an interesting thing. God has his goal, and he's constantly doing his part. But that doesn't mean that we're always doing our part. He's doing his part. We're not always doing our part. That we have a part in this. And that's part of why God gets his goal in the day of Christ Jesus, when we stand before Christ in heaven. How much of God's goal he gets depends upon how much we cooperate with him here and now. Otherwise, God just waits until we're dead, And he gets the rest of his goal. He gets us perfected. But part of God's goal is to offer to us, how much of this do you want while you're still there? You can just wait until you get here, and then you got it, and you're good. But if you want some of it there, I'm trying to work with you here. Just cooperate with this, and you can have more of your heavenly blessing while you're still there. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Now in context, it's a long-term plan for captive Israel. So you go read that context. He's specifically addressing this to Israel. It's also a long-term plan for his people generally. But how much of it we get to have while we're here, well, that's a large part up to us. But this is God's character. That the people who had disobeyed him bad enough that as a nation they failed and were taken captive, even in the middle of that, God says that I know the plans I have for you. My plan for you is to prosper you. My plan for you is not to harm you. That's not my plan. My plan was prosper. The harm was a byproduct of your own behavior. That wasn't my plan. My plan was to give you hope. My plan was to give you a future. And my plan is still to prosper you, to give you hope, and to give you a future. The harm that's happening to you is not my plan. And consistent with God's character, that's what we can reasonably expect from him. But how much of it do we get to have while we're here? That's a large part up to us. Now, God has made much already true. There's some things that are just flat out true. 2 Corinthians 5:17, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creation. The old has passed away. Behold, the new has come. That's just true. Done deal. 2 Corinthians 5:21, he made him who knew no sin to be sin on our behalf, so that we might become the righteousness of God in him. Done deal. It's finished. But there are also truths requiring our cooperation. One such truth starts with our old self was crucified with him. That's Romans 6:6. That part's done deal, already true. That our old self was crucified with Jesus. That innately sinful self, that malicious self, that anti-love self, that anti-joy self, that anti-peace self, and just sticking to those parts of the fruit of the Spirit, the part of us that is unloving. Now, love is, our short definition that we use, is I want the best for you. That part of us that wants the worst for some people. That part was crucified with Christ. That love includes I want to be the best for you. For some people, they literally pursue being bad for people. That they are bad, they don't care that they're bad, that they're so selfishly self-interested, they're oblivious to, don't care, or intentionally inflict damage on other people. That part's been crucified on the cross. And if you have accepted Christ, that part can be gone. It has been crucified with him. And peace. Inner peace and peace with our fellow man. That desire to seek conflict, often to define ourselves by conflict and conquest, of fighting being our defining characteristic, of picking the fights, making the attacks, that has been crucified with Christ on the cross. That inner conflict where we attack ourselves in ways that we know if we said that out loud to somebody else, we might get punched in the nose for stuff like that, slapped right across the head. And we might even realize it, and reasonably so. the things that if someone else said it to us, we think, this guy's a jerk. And we do it to ourselves. That part of us has been crucified with Christ on the cross. However, we can still live by that old self. We can still choose to live that old way. We can decide, I'm hanging on to that. That's familiar to me. I know how to live that way. That gives me power. That protects my heart. That makes me feel like I have permission to do bad things because of what was done to me. And if I let it go, then I'm responsible. So we can choose to hang on to these things, and many of us do. So we can still live by that old self. So even though we're told that's been crucified, we can still live by that crucified self. But God admonishes us to take it off and put on the new self that God made for us. Ephesians 4:22 through 24, skipping some of the in-between commentary. Lay aside the old self and put on the new self. I mean, it's literally like a coat or a cloak. To lay aside the old self, like take it off. Stop wearing it. That's old stuff. You've got a new set of clothes. You got a new coat. You got a new cloak. You got new stuff. You don't have to wear the old stuff. Lay aside the old self and put on the new self. And that's Ephesians 4:22 through 24 if you want to go see the rest of that unpacking in there. So what about earthly adventure? Well, cooperate with God. Just cooperate with God. We could wait for eternity. We could wait for heaven. Or, and this is an option for us, we could walk out some portion of it right here and right now. Philippians 3:14. I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. So in the epistle to the Philippians, the statement of action is, I press on toward the goal. What's the goal? It's the prize, the thing I get to win, of the upward call, a higher and better self, a more spiritual self, more love, more joy, more peace, which is Galatians 5:22 to 23. The fruit of the Spirit. If you let the Spirit take hold and bear its fruit, you will see love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control all arise naturally as the fruit of being spiritual, as the fruit of growing in others' principles and religion, of the fruit, the natural fruit of having God define your religion, having your religion define what it defines of principles, having your principles define what it defines of your relationship with others. And that when you draw on the highest to pour into lower levels, the natural byproduct, what grows naturally is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. A core reality of life is this. We are constantly creating new starting points. right here, right now, any goal I might set today starts with who I am right here, right now. Starts with what I have right here, right now. Starts with where I am right here, right now. This starting point in this moment has been created by the accumulation of causes and effects rippling back from my distant past. And I have participated in the creation of this moment. And if I set a new goal, if I set a new standard, if I decide to go anywhere from here, this is my starting point. As obvious a metaphor as geography. Right now, I'm in Spring Valley, just right near San Diego, California. And if I decide I want to go to Disneyland, that's 5 north. And so from here, I'll go 94, and I'll just take 94 to 5, and I'll head north. And Disneyland's up there. Well, in a few weeks, I'm going to be in St. Louis. If I'm at the Route 66 Holiday Inn in St. Louis, and I decide I want to go to Disneyland, it is not the same drive. Because I will be in a different place. Now, I can say, like, okay, well, I know how to get there from San Diego, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to drive from St. Louis to San Diego, and then take that path up to Anaheim to go to Disneyland. Takes a couple of hours from here. It's going to take a couple of days from there. Unless I get on the plane and fly. Different path. Different course. Different starting point. Even if I'm after the same goal. Every plan produces outcomes. Sometimes the outcome is success, which means that the plan was aimed at a goal, and the plan resulted in the goal. Sometimes the outcome is failure. That you had a plan, maybe you executed perfectly on the plan, but as it worked out, the cause and effect of the plan interacting with the variables of reality did not produce the goal you were after. And we call that failure. In the sense that you had a target and you didn't hit your target. Now, sometimes what you have is perhaps partial success. So if you were aimed at a project and you were supposed to make $100,000 on the project, and because the costs kind of ran out of control, you ended up making $80,000 on the project. You got most of the goal, and whether that's partial success, because you got 80% there, or whether you count that as failure, largely depends upon how important that $100,000 mark was. If you needed $100,000 in order to avoid bankruptcy, you needed $100,000 to make your car payments and your house payments and keep your kids in school, that might be failure for you, depending upon what that money was supposed to do. But for a lot of people, they'll look at it and say, okay, I was trying to triple my business, I doubled my business. I'm very happy with doubling my business. I didn't triple it, that was the goal. But doubling it does really, really well for me. Then you might count that as partial success. But sometimes you just get outright failure. It just absolutely falls apart. It could be that you're executing on your plan and the plan falls apart. That you can't do what you thought you could do. Or you fall apart. Where you could do it, but you fall apart. You can't keep up with it. It's too much for you. Which is entirely possible. But here's where you have the important lesson time. Whether failure is final, which means you just failed, that's it, end of story, or failure is a learning experience, is up to us. We get to decide. If we learn that we failed to hit the target, but we have not fully failed, that negative experience becomes the tuition that we have paid to the universe that's a university to gain insight, to learn stuff like those business people that go through bankruptcy after bankruptcy after bankruptcy. And they keep playing the game, and they keep losing the game, but they're losing in different ways because they beat the last problem. They got past the thing that got them last time. They won, and then they got nailed by something a little further down the road. until they make it. So if we learn, that lesson can be treasure. Remember, all things work together. Remember, every failure has in it the seed of an equal or greater benefit. And are you going to plant that seed? Are you going to cultivate that seed? Are you going to do something with the fruit of that tree? Success gives us new resources for the next goal. If I have succeeded at something, I have a new starting point. This is my starting point because I made it. But it doesn't mean I have to be done with everything. I can have a new goal. And this is my new launching pad. Learning gives us new insight for the next goal. So if I was going for a goal and I didn't make it, but I learned something. If I was executing the plan and the plan fell apart, but I learned something. If I was in pursuit of the goal, trying to follow the plan, but I fell apart, I couldn't keep up, but I learned something. That gives me new power from wherever my starting point is, what I learned by success, what I learned by failure, what I learned about the way I failed. If it turns out I fell apart, then I know I need more support. Maybe I fell apart because I was trying to bite off more than I could chew. And that's why I fell apart. I couldn't keep up. I need more than 6 hours of sleep a night. Like in my particular case, if I get less than 6 hours of sleep a night, I'm good for that one day in a row. If I have 2 days where I get less than 6 hours of sleep, I can tell that my brain gets foggy. I can tell. On just 2 days. And if I had this idea in my head that I was going to be able to write a book in 30 days by cutting my sleep back to just 4 hours, okay, book writing requires your brain power. By about the third day there, I am not going to produce a useful page, period. And I would fall apart. I wouldn't be able to accomplish that goal. Now, if I have a purely physical goal, a physical training goal, I might last a week. But at some point, my body is just going to fall apart. It's not going to be able to keep up. And if I begin to realize what my limits are and how trying to structure past the boundaries of my limits is affecting me, then when I set a new goal, I go, okay, I know what I can and can't do. So if I want to do a similar project and say I want to get a book done, I need to still get enough sleep. That means if I need my 2 hours to work on the book every day, I can't take it from my sleep. I've got to go find those 2 hours somewhere else because I will fall apart on 4 hours of sleep. And then I would know, all right, I need to work with people, I need to work with my own schedule to go find those hours in a place other than sleep. And work that way. So success gives us new resources, but learning gives us new insight. And the things we learn help us structure it better when we go in the next time. Either way, we can be winning if we choose to be winning. Now, here is a particular thing I always want people to remember, and I repeat this from time to time. The treasure is the lesson. The failure is trash. If you can learn the lesson without having to go through the failure, that's ideal. And that's why you get coaches and counselors and consultants. That's why you have accountability partners and mentors and teachers and leaders, is to help you get to your success and learn the lessons without having to have the failures to learn those lessons. If you can learn your lessons by the observation of someone else's failure, that is enormously powerful. What you're after is the treasure. What you're after is the wisdom. What you're after is the insight. You don't want to go through the struggle if the struggle isn't part of the necessary part of success. And by the way, that even applies to physical things. We think, well, no pain, no gain. Well, just because there is pain doesn't mean there is gain. In physical training, there's something called overtraining. And overtraining happens when you exert yourself physically at high levels, you're breaking your body down. You get better as your body adapts, but in order to adapt, it needs to be properly fueled, and it needs enough rest. Overtraining is when you keep pushing your body without giving it recovery time. And if it doesn't have its recovery time over time, you're breaking your body down. You're not actually getting better. Now, I've been guilty of this. But when I turned, I forget what age I turned, it might have been 50. We'll just use 50 as an example. I have an exercise set called the conditioning kata. And I decided, well, for my birthday, to celebrate 50, I'm going to do 50 conditioning katas in 50 days. I'm going to do one every single day. Well, about 2 or 3 weeks into it, I began to realize that it was getting harder and harder. I was overtraining my body. And without a day in between to recover, I was getting weaker, not stronger. But I'd already committed. And my threshold day was we took the family to Disneyland. Well, we want to be there when it opens, so we drove up the night before, but I still have to do this conditioning kata. So I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, so I got 5.5 hours of sleep, to do this conditioning kata. And I got through it. The conditioning kata is pretty heavy on legs. Then we walked into the park when they opened, and it's Disneyland and California Adventure. Lots of walking and standing involved. My legs are shot. The plan was we would stay until about 6 o'clock. But at 6 o'clock, everyone's having such a good time, we decided to stick it out. And so we roll around at 8 o'clock. Now we've been in the park like 12 hours. And everyone's still having a great time. So we decided we're going to stay until we shut this park down. So after waking up at 5:30 to do this conditioning kata, I put in 16 hours of walking and standing around this park. And then it's at the end, and typical for one of my family habits, is I went to go jog back to the hotel parking lot to go pick up the car, to drive back and pick up the family and drive home. Well, I started jogging and my legs just completely cramped up. So I ended up mostly walking back to the hotel while the family waited for me to come back. And that kind of drove home this idea that I was way, way, way overtraining. I stuck out my 50-day commitment, and I may have been leaner at the end of 50 days, but I was weaker. My joints hurt. I was paying a price for keeping that commitment. And I learned, don't do that again. I had to gain insight. I did it because I said I would. It was no longer healthy for me, but if it ends at the 50-day mark, and then I'm done. And so I can keep my word when it gets hard, because I didn't say I'm going to do this to get in shape. I said I'm going to do this in honor of 50 years of life. And I got there. It was a bad idea. And when we learn, just because there's pain doesn't mean there's gain. Just because my body could do that, and it did do that, doesn't mean it was good for it. It might have been good for my willpower and self-discipline, but it was really not healthy for my body. And it wasn't good for my fitness. And I learned better. I have never again made a commitment like that. I build in my test phase. I build in enough flexibility on banks and borrows so that way if I need to skip a Disney day, I can do it the day before. Could it do that with the conditioning kata? Because 1 a day was hard enough. 2 a day would be almost impossible. But if I could make it 5 to 7 days a week until I have 50 done instead of every single day, so that I could have skipped the Disney day and I could have gotten another 2 or 3 hours of sleep. That would, 2 hours of sleep. That would have been great. So I learned, because I almost fell apart, physically fell apart, keeping a commitment, sticking to a plan. So we have to keep these things in mind as we build our plans. Now, here's part of the exciting thing, because we talked about what you learn from failure. But what about what you get with success? Spectacular goals with spectacular outcomes lead to spectacular opportunity. If you get some really cool goals, that new starting point is a whole new launching pad. The classic parable of the talents is Matthew 15, 14 through 30. But today we're going to look at the parallel in Luke 19, 12 to 27. And I'm not going to read the whole passage here. I'm going to do a kind of a compare and contrast. But you can go to Luke chapter 19, verses 12 through 27, and read that yourself. Now, in both versions of the story, which I presume are two different tellings, the servants received a sum of money. And in both of the stories, one servant only preserved what he was given, and then he was punished. In both stories, two of the servants succeeded in the law of multiplication. They literally multiplied the money given to them in whatever the period of time was. And that's one of the things, is we're not told what the period of time was. In the Matthew version, one of them was given 5 talents, one of them was given 2 talents, and one of them was given 1. And the one who had the least was scared, and he hid his talent. So when his master came back, he said, "See, I kept it. I didn't do anything with it, but it's still here." One of them received 2 talents that his Lord decided, "You can handle 2." And he doubled his 2 to 4. And one of them was given 5. And he was treated as, "You can handle 5, so I give you 5," and he doubled 5. But in the Luke version of the story, it's about a king. And a king's going to go receive another kingdom. And so he's going to be leaving for a while. And there's some other issues involved in that. So he's gone for some period of time, we don't know. But he leaves some money in the care of his servants. But we're not told a lot of the pieces, except that in this one, everyone got the same money. And one of them multiplied the money by 10. One of them multiplied the money by 5. They multiplied the money, much more than just merely doubling the money by 5 or by 10. And in both the multipliers, they were called good and faithful for successfully applying the law of multiplication. And what's distinct in the Luke version is that the returning Lord's reward was greatly amplified. In the Luke version, the servant that multiplied from 1 to 10, he was given 10 cities to govern. The servant that multiplied from 1 to 5, he was given 5 cities to govern. The principle here is faithful in little, faithful in much. You show you can manage a small business, and we give you a chance to handle a medium-sized business. You can handle a medium-sized business, we give you a chance to handle a larger business. Think about the way we do this in work. You can handle that job, you can handle the entry-level work, we'll promote you to shift leader. Or you can handle shift leader, and you do a really good job as shift leader, we're going to promote you to night manager. Oh, you handle night manager really well, now we're going to promote you to assistant manager. Oh, you're a great assistant manager, now you can be a manager. Oh, you're a great franchise manager, now we can promote you to a regional manager or a district manager. And that as you show that you're capable, you're faithful, and faithful isn't just that you're trustworthy, that's certainly a part of it, but we talked last time about this definition of faith. Faith is the ability to take what you know and logically extend it to what you don't know for sure. So faith is the ability to trust in what you don't know for sure, as a logical extension of what you do know for sure. So being faithful in little means I can handle the little, and the things I don't already know, I can logically sort out because of what I know. And faithful in much is, okay, now this is going to be a bigger game. I know how this game's played. I've watched some of that game. If I understand how to logically extend the principles and apply the principles right there, I think I can play that game too. And you just need to be good enough to be a solid beginner. So I have some friends who have been learning how to run a martial arts school. And in just a couple of weeks, they get to run a martial arts school. And they are inadequate to the task. Why? They haven't done it yet. They're great to be beginners, and they'll learn the rest as they go. That feeling of inadequacy you have at the beginning of a thing is supposed to be there. I worry more if someone doesn't have that feeling, because then they walk in and, I know exactly what I'm doing. That means they're not going to be ready for a problem. Someone's going to have, well, that's not supposed to happen. But it happens. When you walk in and you don't feel totally ready on your first day of beginning something, we call that normal. And that if you can be just a little bit nervous, at least when you're beginning, to recognize there's likely to be some stuff that's going to show up that I don't already know how to do, and I'll kind of have to figure out a few things as I go, is a healthy perspective on any new project. Too much certainty makes you overlook the sometimes obvious. It will get hard. Be joyful anyway. James chapter 1, 2 through 4, we unpacked this last time. Consider it all joy, brethren, when you encounter many kinds of trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance. And let endurance have its perfect result, that you may be whole and complete and lacking in nothing. And we unpacked that in more detail last time, so I'm just going to continue on to a fun principle. Time travel. Time travel to enjoy the story. Romans 8:28. For we know that God causes all things to work together for good for those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And James 1, 2 through 4 that we just read, consider it all joy, brethren, when you encounter many kinds of trials, knowing the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its perfect result, that we may be whole and complete and lacking in nothing. Those are just a couple of examples of God using a future outcome to put the present in perspective. Part of it, we call it future pacing. And future pacing is, if I look at where I am right now, and I look at what I'm going through right now, I look at what I'm doing right now, and I project that forward, what will that future look like? And God talks about all things working together for good. So yeah, you might be in the middle of a bunch of bad stuff, but there's ways all this comes together. James talks about, yeah, you may be going through all kinds of a mess right now, but you can be whole and complete, lacking in nothing, if you walk this out really, really well. So we do the same thing when we immerse ourselves in our future successes. When we look backwards from that imagined future success to the price we paid getting there, in context with the success. And from that moment of success, when you look back at the price you paid on your way there, would it have been worth it to you? Will you be enjoying the success for many, many years or decades to come? Or will you be steeped in the price that you paid and have a problem with the price? That helps put it in context. That helps put it in perspective. And that can help you make cleaner decisions. But from that place of future success, we can enjoy the story. And here's the fun part. we can romanticize the story. We can enjoy the success and take joy in how it may unfold. Does it mean it's going to go exactly the way we envision? Absolutely not. Most things don't go quite according to plan. It just seems to be a reality of life. But we can still enjoy the process, and that what we go through becomes part of the story that we get to tell from that moment of success. So we can romanticize with metaphor to create adventure. Now here's something that's kind of funny when it comes to me. My top 2 organizing principles, I'll give you all 3. Number 1 is reality is more important than anything we believe. Number 2 is all principles must be consistently applied. And number 3 is that the Bible is the undisputed primary source material for Christianity. So you have this reality thing. Now, another part of my value system and some of my top values is I have an aversion, a moving away value. I will do things to avoid drama. And one of the problems I have with drama is drama violates both the reality principle and it violates the principle on principles. And so I tend to not like drama. But here's the funny thing. I actually do like drama. I just don't like negative drama. I love positive drama. We call that romanticizing. Romanticizing is making something seem better than it really is. Romanticizing, being able to be romantic, includes being able to touch ideals in poetic, dramatic, and playful ways, which are often, by definition, not anchored merely in factual reality. So while I believe reality is more important than anything we believe, I also believe in romance, in romanticizing things. Even simple things, playfully romanticized, become adventures. So we can romanticize goals and plans to create adventures. Now, here's part of how this interacts with my versions of reality, is you are aware of the unreality. It's like when you're watching a television program, you suspend belief enough so you get in the story, but you still know it's a TV program. Then when you go enjoy a movie, you suspend belief enough to kind of get into the story of the movie, but you still know it's a movie. When you romanticize, it's the same thing. That I know I'm being romantic. I know I'm being playful. I know I'm being dramatic. And it can be over the simplest things. So I had a friend of mine who was coming to town and she was getting an Airbnb. And because of the way her schedule worked out, she found out she had a thing she had to be at the first night. And she was going to have to land, get in her Airbnb, and go. And she asked if I would do her a favor and stock it up with groceries for her. So when I picked her up at the airport, or they picked up the groceries for her to stock it up. So when I picked her up at the airport, we already had her groceries. And I said, sure, I'd be happy to do that. So I'm running around to the stores trying to find her things. Well, one of the things she needs is this particular brand of gluten-free bagels that she would like. And it doesn't have to be that particular brand, but that's her chosen brand. And I had everything on the list but that. I mean, 2 trips to 2 different stores, I had everything, but that one thing, I couldn't find that one thing. And, I let her know, okay, I've got this, and that, and then, these other things that you asked for, I'm still looking for this. Well, her history was, anytime something doesn't go cleanly according to plan and someone has to sacrifice more for her, they're mad at her. And that she's in trouble for that. Like, well, why is this so important to you? You're so selfish. Why is it you want this thing? I'm not running around to all these places looking for this one stupid thing for you. And that's her life experience. So when she found out that I found everything but the one thing, she said, oh, well, you don't have to worry about it. It's totally okay. I'll be fine without it. And my response was like, I'm on a quest. I will not be defeated by bagels. Now, that's a romanticized, dramatic way to put it. And it says, I am on a quest. I will prove my loyalty and love of my friend by fighting these bagels for you. I will not be defeated. And I'm being playful, and I'm having fun. And this was like alien to her. And she's thinking, So I'm not in trouble because this has gotten inconvenient. He's having fun having to go to 4 different places looking for my bagels. I've never seen that before. Well, the reality was, I've got one thing left on the list, and I have now been to my 3rd store, and I have now been to my 4th store. In a pure reality perspective, it is getting annoying. But in a playful, romanticized perspective, I am on a quest to demonstrate my love and loyalty to my friend. And I made it fun. And by being able to be that kind of playful, using metaphor, in this case the metaphor of a quest, create an adventure out of what could just as easily, and perhaps even more easily, have been an annoying running around to find this last stupid thing on this list. But because of the way I romanticize, it made it an adventure. We can romanticize goals to create adventure. We can romanticize plans to create adventure. We can use metaphors to create this romance with our goals and our plans and our objectives and who we are and how we show up, so we can enjoy it more. Because if I'm going to be committed to doing it anyway, and I told her, here's my limit though, just so you know, if I go to 7 stores and I can't find it, I will admit defeat. Well, I found it in the 4th store, so I was okay. I didn't have to admit defeat. Just so that she knew I wasn't going to be endlessly running to stores, even if that made me late to pick her up at the airport. But I told her I reasonably have time to go to 7 stores. I'm willing to go to 7 stores and look for this. Because some of the stores I went to, I was pretty sure wasn't going to have a specialty brand of gluten-free bagels. But I was pretty sure if I go to Trader Joe's and Whole Foods and stuff, I would be able to find it. And I figured between the 2 of those, I was probably going to be okay. So time travel again. Time travel to your future. Christianity is the ultimate example of this. God giving us an eternal future in heaven to keep the present in perspective. Sometimes that's the most powerful use of faith that gets people through the hardest times, is they know I have an eternal destination. I know that in the grand scheme of eternity, it all works out. It just may not be working out for me right here, right now. It may not work out for me in my lifetime. It may not work out for my family. It may not work out for my kids in our earthly life. But there is an eternity that is bigger than this. And I can take joy in that eternity. So time travel to your future, time travel to your eternity, is something that God does as the ultimate example, manifest in how Christianity works. We are reminded in dozens of places in the Bible that a wonderful destiny awaits us, and God paints us a picture of that destiny. Paints us enough of a picture to give us these metaphors that we can try to grasp here to understand. When he talks about streets paved with gold, when he talks about gemstone cities, when he talks about many mansions, trying to give us metaphors that we might be able to grasp and wrap our heads around at some level to understand that there is this great thing waiting for us. So we tap into the same wisdom that God uses, that creative wisdom, when we immerse ourselves in our own future reality. As we pursue our goals, we can romanticize it with playful meaning so that we can enjoy the process. Here's a key. Balance romanticizing and future pacing with action. I want to underscore that last part, with action. One of the things that we have that comes up in Christianity a lot is people will pray for things and not taking any action to get. Where they're praying for a job, but they're not actually looking for a job, they're just praying for a job. They're praying for money, they're not working for the money, they're just praying for the money. That they're praying for their health. They're not actually doing anything to live a healthier lifestyle or seek any medical advice. They're just praying for it. So you want to balance romanticizing, balance prayer, balance future pacing, balance a popular thing is a couple of versions of the law of attraction with action. Do stuff. Doing romanticized future pacing is powerful for mindset. It can help create a sense of being pulled toward your goal. It almost magnetizes your goal to help draw you through your plan, to draw you through the hard work. When you lose sight of the goal, when you lose sight of the playfulness, you lose sight of the metaphor, you get bogged down in the price that you're paying now, and you get bogged down in the negative emotion, and then it ramps up and you get stuck in the self-protection reaction, and then it gets hard to do anything. But if you keep your eye on the prize, and you romanticize it, you immerse yourself in it, it can help create that sense of being pulled through the process to get to the goal. So it's powerful for the mindset, but, well, first, some ultimate eternal spiritual truths are a done deal. So we can trust and rest in that. But, and, most of our earthly deal is not a done deal. It requires our cooperation. We have to cooperate with the design and engineering of God's universe. We have to cooperate with the Holy Spirit working us toward our goal. We do all that is ours to do. While praying is powerful and has a lot of incredible benefits. And by the way, it has a lot of incredible benefits no matter God's answer. But among the prayers to not expect a yes to are Daddy, do my homework for me prayers, and Daddy, take my test for me prayers. When we ask God to take care of our responsibilities. When we ask God to fix the thing we keep breaking. When we ask God to do for us that which we ought to do. So ultimately, do all that is yours to do and get all the results that gives you. Cause and effect produces effects. If you don't like the effects, if you don't like the outcomes, adjust the causes set in motion. Once you create harmony with your desired outcome, you get it. If you do not do what is yours to do not be surprised when you don't get the results from the work you didn't do. So I can envision a great physique and mighty muscles. But if I don't go work out, if I don't fuel my physique, I shouldn't be surprised if I don't get the real results. I might envision myself as a master black belt. But if I don't go to class, if I don't practice my material, if I don't review my curriculum, I shouldn't be surprised if that vision I keep putting in my head doesn't come to pass. I need to take action. I need to take enlightened action. The concept of enlightened action, it begins with my light, the goal. That's where I'm going. And I let the light of the goal and the light of who I am now and where I am illuminate this path for me. That when it comes to spiritual matters and matters of eternity, we're told that God's word is a light to the path and a lamp to my feet. Here's a metaphor I want you to play with here. The eternal part, the long term. Good, let's dial that down to a temporal term. It's the light to the path that illuminates the path you need to walk that comes from the goal side. That God gives us the light from eternity to shed a light on the path of our lives. Our goals give us those short-term lights to light the path to the goal, whatever that goal might be. The next part is the lamp unto my feet. That the goal illuminates the path, but I need to know where I step next. And the principles that derive from how are such goals achieved from right here where I am. And I need to know where I am. I need to know who I am. I need to know what I can do and what I can't do. I need to count the cost. So I'm not trying to build a mansion on shifting sand. And have that lamp unto my feet so I can see my next step. I always need to know what is my next step. What's my next step? What's the step after that? What's the step after that? I don't need to see all of it. I see the path. I may not understand the entire path. There might be areas where I see the light up on the hill. I don't see the whole trail from up there, but I see that and I see some of the trail leading up there. I have the light right here. I see what to do next. I can take my next step. And then I can take my next step. And then I can take the next step after that. And keep on moving until I get there. Maybe I'll get there in 10 steps. Maybe I'll get there in 1,000 steps. They say the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. If you have to plot out every single inch of the steps before you begin your 1,000-mile journey, you're not getting anywhere. Sometimes all you can do is figure out the next step. And then you figure out the next step. And you move forward. You become a juggernaut of success because God engineered us as success machines. That we successfully produce outcomes all the time. I woke up this morning and got out of bed. I successfully woke up. I successfully got out of bed. I successfully brushed my teeth. I successfully brushed my hair. I successfully shaved my face. Again and again, things I did, I succeeded, I succeeded, I succeeded, I succeeded. I know what my goal was. My goal was to have my teeth brushed. I know how to do it. So I executed on my plan. I got it done. I succeeded at something. All day long, day after day and week after week, over the arc of our lives, we have succeeded at things time and time again. And we have walked through failure after failure after failure, and we made distinction after distinction after distinction. From the first day, we try to lift up our heads. So on the first day, we try to scoot along the ground. From the first day, we try to stand up on 2 feet. From the first day, we tried to walk. From the first day, we tried to run and jump and dance and skip and play. We had failure after failure after failure, and we kept making distinctions, figuring it out, moving forward, and getting competent at things. Learning to brush your teeth. Learning to comb your hair. Yeah, this morning I nicked myself shaving. You know, I have some experience of shaving. I still nicked myself shaving. I forgot that I put a new blade in my razor. I was reminded when I nicked myself shaving. And we succeed, and we succeed, and we succeed, and we succeed. Well, here's a hard reality to grasp. Sometimes the things we most hate about our lives, we have successfully created because we have taken the actions in the context of our reality to create that outcome. A lot of variables get thrown at us. That's the context. A lot of things that come at us, we can't do anything about the fact they're coming at us. But that's our playing field. Sometimes it's a fair playing field. Most of the time it's an unfair playing field, which means that there's some combination of advantages and disadvantages. Where you have an unfair advantage, that's not fair. When you have an unfair disadvantage, that's not fair either. That's also life. Sometimes the simple thing is, it's really not fair that I live in the 21st century and most of humanity didn't get to. It's really not fair that I live in the United States of America and most of the world doesn't get to. It's really kind of not fair that I have food in my fridge and a roof over my head and the running water that comes into my place and most of the world doesn't have that. That's not fair. That gives me an unfair advantage to move forward from here. But all of us have our starting points. All of us have our launching pads. All of us have our contexts. When someone did something bad to me, that's not fair. If I didn't take action that created that outcome, it's not fair that I have to pay the price for that. But it's also not fair that I get 20th century Southern California living, while some of my friends back east are freezing right now. I can see outside from here, and I could go to the beach today. It's the middle of November. I could go to the beach today. I have some friends who are shoveling snow today. That's not fair, but it's the reality of life. This is the context of my life. What can I do with what I have? If I decide to not do something about a negative situation, I may not be responsible for the negative situation having arose in the first place, but I am responsible for what I choose to do or not do with it. So if I ended up landing in bankruptcy having done my very best, I can live in bankruptcy. Or I can live in wisdom and decide, am I ready to play this game again? And what is it going to take for me to find another start? And I might have to start small. I might end up having to get some minimum wage job just to show I can do the job, so I can become the shift leader, so I can become the night manager, so I can become the assistant manager, and work my way up over a few years' time so I can make the income so I can go start a business again. I may have to start off with a multi-level business that I can get into for a couple of $100s, so that I can start to generate some revenue on a part-time basis so I can afford to do my business. I might have to start that small. I might have to borrow some money from someone to get the $150 to sign up for the thing, to start making the money, and then pay back the $150 in a couple of months while I try to figure this thing out. I might be on food stamps. I might be on public assistance just to try to not die. But if I know where I'm going, I know what my next step is, I know where I'm aiming. I'm not just trying to stay here. I'm trying to survive here to create a platform to give a shot at going up that hill again. I haven't given up. But I have to do all that is mine to do. And I have to accept the fact that my current reality, the parts I love and the parts I don't love, are an interplay of my choices with the context of my life. And I may have little influence over the immediate context of my life, but I have tremendous influence over the choices that I make. And then, by the way, here's a curious reality too. We have tremendous power over the context of our lives. So a friend of mine pursuing big things recognized that if he went back home and he lived with his family, that was going to pull him back down. He chose a more difficult context and pursued a more difficult context because the more difficult context was a launching pad to what he was aiming for. And he recognized that. He had the wisdom to recognize it, and he had the tenacity and the strength to make that choice and walk it out. The comfortable choice was go home with family and play small. But he's not willing to play small. He may land there if situations dictate that's where he lands, but he's not going to keep playing small. If he goes somewhere and plays small, he's only playing small to create a safe enough platform to launch again. But he decided, no, I'm not ready to play small. I don't need to do that. I can still play this game. I just need a little help, a little extra support, and I can make it through this hard period without going and doing the comfortable thing. And he made his choice. And he's playing the big game. And he's future pacing, he's envisioning that future, he's stepping into it, and he's living it out, especially on the hard days, so that he can have the mindset to step in to do massive action. And that's the key. The future pacing, the romanticizing, all of that, it's a mindset game. That's where he anchors his faith to generate the enthusiasm, not just to feel good for the sake of feeling good, but to generate that feeling of excitement and enthusiasm to take his action. And if you romanticize your goals, if you romanticize your plans, then you romanticize yourself. It can inspire you to do the things that are yours to do. So that if you want to create a shift in the outcome that you're getting in your life, and right here, right now, you can stand in this context, look around, say, like that part, I like that part, love that part. So I'm going to work to preserve that. This isn't so good, but I'm like 2 steps away from something good right there. I'm going to do that. I can do that really quick. And this is the hard part. But man, look at the other side of all of that hardship. That is so worth it. And you can envision yourself as a warrior, drawing your sword, leaping into battle. You can envision your team as your fellow adventurers. You've got your archers to shoot down that dragon. If they can ground that dragon, you can take it. You've got your companions back home keeping the home fires burning so that when the fight gets too hard, you've got a safe place to retreat to. You know you have a place that you can walk in and you can take off that heavy helmet and drop that sword you've been clutching all day long and drop the shield and let the armor fall to the ground and breathe. And that you know when you're battling through the horde of orcs and the dragon and all of the enemies that might oppose you, that you can battle your way through this because in your entire life, nothing is taking you out of the battle yet. All that's romanticized metaphor. But boy, does that get me going. That gets me up in the morning. That lets me walk through the hard and painful times. And in this moment of mine, filled with joy and heartache, filled with excitement and a sense of having that heart ripped out of me, that I can enjoy the adventure, even when I'm facing some of the hard stuff at exactly the same time. Because it's an adventure. And I cast it in the forms that inspires me. So I can battle my way through. And I know I've got my home fires burning. I've got my companions that help, and I've got my companions that are my refuge. And I can do the things that are mine to do. And I will find out what I'm ultimately in harmony with by the outcomes that occur. My job is to do my part to be in harmony with the outcomes as best as I can. And I'll find out how in harmony the pieces is I don't know about and can't do anything about as I go. And we'll see. But it's a grand adventure. I have goals. I have opportunities. God has placed things on my heart. God has left a lot of stuff just up to me. And I get to make my choices as I get ready to move forward, doing what is mine to do, living the life that is mine to claim, of whatever slice of heaven, however big a slice, as I can choose to grab out of what is made available to me. And that is where I am and where I'm going. And you can decide where you're going from wherever you are and make your own decisions and seek your own light and walk your own path from wherever you are to wherever you're going.